Okay. I'm on the program as getting through. Now, obviously there's a lot more to be said about the matter than can be said in 1 hour. In fact, it's going to take you several years. But having said that, I think there are a couple of useful things that can be said in the time that we do have. I'll start with a confession. I'm a great believer in the basics, in mastering the basics and applying those. Once you know them, then you can be creative within them. So that's what I'm going to focus on in this hour that we do have, what I consider to be the basics to get through. Before I do that, the first thing to know is the storyline of all academic research, like any form of writing, a novel, a short story, a poem, there's a storyline to it. The storyline for academic research is, firstly, have a problem. I mean, if there's no problem, well, why do any work? Okay, there's no problem. So, identify a problem. Then, find out what others know about that problem. In other words, search the literature, do a literature review, because you can't add something to the literature until you know what's there. Once you know what others know, then figure out what you want to do about the problem. In other words, develop your research objectives. Then figure out how to reach those objectives. That's methods. Then do it. Collect the data, analyze it, and finally come to a reliable, evidence-based conclusion. Now, that's not rocket science. Look, there are a lot of bells and whistles that go into the whole thing and all the rest of it. But essentially, that is what academics do. As a PhD candidate, one of the things that you've committed yourselves to is to make an original contribution to knowledge. In other words, at the end of your research, what you come up with, I can't go to the library and look it up. It's new. It's with you. Another part of the PhD is to turn you from a dependent student into an independent scholar. So, I would suggest that you make conscious decisions and realize that the decisions that you do make have consequences. When I say conscious decisions, I mean anticipate ahead. The decisions you make early in your PhD process are going to have consequences throughout. What topic? What problem? Who's my supervisor going to be? What university? And so on and so forth. Anticipate. You know, when I hear that somebody's doing a master's or doctoral degree, I hardly ever wish them good luck. No, I mean, luck shouldn't enter into it. Okay. And it's by thinking ahead that you get ahead. Just as an aside here, this has got nothing to do with getting through, but this idea of strategizing, of realizing that the decisions you make have consequences, that's going to apply to your careers later as well. You know, you can put the same amount of effort into one area, same amount of brain power, same amount of time, same amount of commitment, and pretty much remain unknown for the rest of your life. Or you can do it in another area and become world famous. Certain areas are ripe for contributions. So think ahead as well in terms of where you want this PhD to take you. You know, when people say they have a PhD, I don't find that impressive at all. I mean, there are a lot of people out there with PhDs. What's impressive is what you do with a PhD once you have it. Anyway, I'm drifting. So, first of the basics. Project manage. Plan everything. I've talked a little bit about the importance of strategizing what you do. But plan your time, plan your life. And when I say plan, I don't just mean plan your academic work. I do mean that, of course, as in make a plan, divide it into small tasks, start and finish dates, and all the rest of it. I do mean that, but I don't only mean that. I also mean plan it in your life. You see, a PhD is not your life. A PhD is something you choose to do in your life, and it's a bad plan to confuse them. Okay? It's not worth a divorce, a nervous breakdown, getting fired from your job, etc., etc. Planning is what will keep you going. Look at it this way. If you make a good plan and it's realistic, if you do everything on that plan, you will get your degree. If you do everything on that plan on time, you will get your degree on time. So that's my first one, project manage. As, what was his name? Robert Wolberding. He's supposed to have been the first person to have said, to fail to plan is to plan to fail. Okay? And when it comes to a PhD, that's a bottom line truth. So that's my first piece of advice. Plan your project. Don't drift. Take control. My next one. Let's talk about topics. You know, traditionally, when you hear that somebody's doing a master's or a doctoral degree, you're supposed to say, oh, that's interesting. What's your topic? Okay. Well, on the one hand, it is interesting, but on the other hand, it's not that interesting, because a topic describes the subject area in which you do your research. But one of the things that you're supposed to do is make a unique contribution to knowledge. But try think of an original topic. That's not so easy, is it? Because a topic, per definition, describes a subject area. So, while topics have their uses in research, they allow you to identify gaps, they can allow you to name the significance of your work, you can structure your literature review around them. At the end, you can name the contribution you've made. Your dissertation is not about a topic. What's really interesting is your contribution to that topic. Do you see the distinction? So, yes, when you choose a topic that falls within your area of interest. But don't choose a topic based on your interests alone. You see, too many people choose their topics emotionally, according to how they feel about a certain subject. And they forget the important things, like a problem. What problem are they going to work on? Do I have the resources? Can I get the data? If I need special equipment, can I get that? Are the methods okay? Is my supervisor comfortable with this? Okay. So, while you should give careful thought and choose a topic that you are interested in that will keep you going, not at the expense of other practical matters. Let's talk about the problem. While it may be just about impossible to come up with an original topic, luckily, given the shape that the world is in, we're not going to run out of problems anytime soon. Okay, not in your area, not in your neighbor's area. So, what is a problem? If you look the word problem up in the dictionary, you'll find something like a state of unresolved difficulty. That's not bad. I thought about it a bit, and I thought, that's not a bad definition. In fact, it's pretty close to Duke Ellington's definition, who said a problem is your opportunity to do your best. But I wasn't quite happy, and I thought about it. And it struck me, a problem is a statement of fact with something unpleasant about it, something we don't like, something we'd like to address about it. And that forms the core of the research. So, that's my second of the basics. Have a good, workable problem. Not all problems are appropriate for PhD candidates. You have limits. You have time limits. You probably have financial limits. You don't have a team of researchers helping you. The core thing is to have a real, worthwhile problem that you can tackle in your research in the time available. So, rather than when you hear somebody's doing a master's or doctoral degree, rather than saying, oh, that's interesting, rather say, oh, what's your problem? Okay, because that is interesting. Okay, then you know what they're hoping to contribute to a topic. Now, the third of the basics. Of course, if you have a problem and that's all you have, well, then I'm sorry already, because you have a problem. Okay. It's not about the problem either. It's about what you do about the problem. That's the core of it. There are a number of ways you can let your readers know what you're going to do about the problem. The first and the most obvious is tell them your research objectives, what you hope to achieve regarding the problem. Then you've got to tell them how you're going to do it. For that, you're going to have either research questions, a hypothesis, or a research proposition, or a combination. A hypothesis is a falsifiable proposition. It's either true or false, right or wrong, black or white, no shades of gray. That addresses the problem, and if that hypothesis is tested, it'll lead to the achievement of the objectives. Very useful, but unfortunately, not all the things that interest academics are so nice and clean-cut. Not everything is true or false, right or wrong. A research proposition is a non-falsifiable proposition. In other words, it is something that you state, that you will investigate in a methodologically sound way with evidence and come to a conclusion. But that conclusion will not necessarily be perfectly true or perfectly false. Like under some circumstances it may be this way, others that way, etc. If that's the way you formulate your research, that's great. That can work too. Sometimes, though, we don't know enough to come up with any form of proposition, not a hypothesis or a research proposition. And in a case like that, all you have are questions, research questions. And then you will pose those questions in a methodologically sound way with evidence, answer them, and come to the conclusion. All of these, of course, address the problem, and if the hypothesis is tested, the proposition is argued, or the questions are answered, should lead to the achievement of the research objectives. That is the core of it. Think very, very, very carefully in the beginning when you start about that, because what you put down there is what you will be judged on. How worthwhile they are, the significance, how reliably you've answered them, the methods, etc., etc. That is the core of it. That brings me to the next of the basics, the significance of your research. In other words, how important is it? How worthwhile is it to do? The answer is easy to find. What you do is you tell somebody what your hypothesis, research questions, research proposition, or objectives are, have them look you in the eye and say to you, so what, who cares? The answer that you give them to that so what, who cares, equals the significance of your research. Okay? When you answer them, your answers will fall into one of three categories. The first possible answer will be practical significance. The practical significance of a research project lies in what we're able to do thanks to your research that we couldn't do before that research was done. The second possible answer will be the theoretical significance of your work. The theoretical significance of your work lies in what we're able to understand, what we're able to explain that we couldn't understand or explain before. But now, thanks to your research, we can. That's theoretical. And the third category is methodological significance. It may be that you develop new ways of doing things, of arriving at conclusions. Doctoral dissertations tend to make a heavier theoretical contribution because theoretical contributions, again, I'm generalizing, there are exceptions, but in general, theoretical contributions are more important than practical contributions. Because if you make a practical contribution, but you don't know how or why it works, well, that's good, because we can do whatever it is that we couldn't do before. But we're limited to doing just that, because we don't understand the mechanisms. But if you can explain the theory behind it, why it works, how it works, then we have the practical contribution and we have the understanding which can allow us to do more things. Just a contradictory bit. Of course, the reason we're interested in theoretical contributions is because they allow us to do more practical things. So that's the next one. Your research must have sufficient significance in order for you to get your PhD. The requirements for significance for a PhD are considerably higher than that for a master's. Having said that, you're not required to redefine the field or to shake the foundations of academe with your work. Okay? Your primary goal is still to get your PhD. Okay? That other stuff, that you do afterwards. The next of the basics, methods. Can you get to a reliable conclusion? If you want to pick a fight with an academic, question their methods. That'll do it every time. If you want a real fight, by the way, question their data. Okay? Because that doesn't just question their competence, it also questions their integrity. But back to methods. This is key, because your methods will determine how reliable your conclusions are. At its most basic level, a method is simply a structured way of going about something. And in that sense, you can have a method of data collection, a method of data analysis, a method of getting to your conclusions, etc. However, it gets a bit more complicated than that because, unfortunately, there are no ISO standards defining research terminology. A second possible meaning of the word method is the research techniques that you use. In other words, that's when you hear, excuse me, that's when you hear people speak of an experimental method or a comparative method or a case study method, etc. Then they're referring to the technique. A third possible meaning of the word method is your application of that technique. In other words, what you physically do with it. You could be doing an experiment, I could be doing an experiment, but our protocols could be completely different. When one speaks of your method, it's how you apply a research technique. Whatever the case may be, key to your work is that your method is applicable, ethical, reliable, and above all, something that you can do in terms of practicalities. Okay? And when I say practicalities, I mean things like funding, equipment, travel, numbers of people that you may need to interview, whatever the case may be. The next of the basics, your data. Your conclusions can be no better than your data. You see, have you ever wondered why the activity that you're engaged in is called research? You see, you'll agree with me that your conclusions can't be better than the arguments that you give for them, right? Academics are not big on taking your word for stuff. It's about what you can show. But your arguments won't be stronger than the evidence that you give for them. The evidence that you give won't be stronger than the data you have. And the data won't be stronger than the quality of the research that you do. So research goes to the heart of it. Now, data, there's a linear correlation between the quality of your conclusions and the quality of the data. If the data is faulty, so are the conclusions, period. If the data is questionable, at best, so are the conclusions. If the data is good, depending on what you do with it, the conclusions may also be good. This is not a place to be optimistic. You need good quality data, and you need it in the time that you have to do your doctoral degree. Don't be optimistic. Check beforehand. One of the saddest things that one sees as a supervisor is when a student has a project and they have to compromise halfway through because they can't get the data or the amount of data that they initially hoped for. Check it out beforehand. Make sure that the data is sufficient in quantity and in quality. The next one, this we could talk about a full day. Have a good, full proposal. Okay? A proposal describes what you propose to do. If what you propose to do is good, if it makes sense, then it'll work. And if it works, you'll get your degree. But if the proposal is faulty, or if there are gaps in it, good luck. You need it then. Okay? A good proposal should give the supervisor and later the research committee everything that they need to know to decide before you start whether, if you do this project, will it work or not? And if it will work, will it be sufficiently significant? Now, if you were to place yourself in your supervisor's shoes, what would you want to know? I'm betting that you'd obviously want to know what it is that they're going to do. In other words, the problem, the significance, the research questions, hypotheses or proposition, the objectives, the scope, delineation, and so on. That is a substantial part of the first chapter of your dissertation. You would probably also want to know, as a supervisor, that what the candidate says is a gap in the literature really is a gap in the literature. So you would want not an elaborated literature review, but a sufficient literature review to show that there is a theoretical grounding for the work that's being proposed, and to show that there is a gap, a lacuna, in the literature. And then you would probably want to know that the candidate can achieve what they want to achieve. And that's an overview of proposed methods. In other words, how are they going to do it? Core to that research instruments. Anything that you use to collect data is a research instrument. If they are faulty, the data's faulty, the conclusions are faulty. So you'd want to know about the research instruments. You'd want to know a bit about the proposed data, the anticipated, expected data. And you'd want to know about the analytical techniques. You'd probably also want to be convinced that this is not going to transgress any ethical guidelines. And you'd want to know the limitations of the study. Now, if all of that sounds like a lot of work for a proposal, it is. But it's work worth doing well, because firstly, it's not wasted. If the proposal is approved, then what you propose to do is what you will do. And so it flips straight over from the proposal into the thesis itself. Proposals are written in the future tense. It's what you wish to do. Dissertation's combination of present and past tense, but it's the same stuff. If your experiences in life have been anything like mine, and in this one I'm betting they have, you will probably have discovered long ago that if something is going to go wrong, okay, doesn't matter if it's a research project or a relationship or whatever the case may be, let it go wrong soon. The damage is less that way, okay? That's what your proposal offers you. It is a much better thing to fail a bad or incomplete proposal than to pass it. Who was it that said? I'm trying to think. A.J. Ayers once said, "Why would you mind being wrong if somebody can show that you are?" Think about it. What's the alternative? Walk around wrong your whole life? No, thank you. Rather point out to me where I'm wrong, show me, I'll fix it, and we'll both be right. That is the spirit in which to take a proposal. So that's the next of the basics. The next one, get a good supervisor. Okay. I cannot begin to tell you how important it is that you have a good supervisor and that you have a good working relationship with that supervisor. There's a lot that could be said about it, and let's face it, I mean, supervisors come in different shapes and sizes, and they have different advising philosophies. Okay. Just about everybody makes a fit with somebody, but very few people make a fit with everybody. So it seems to me that what I would be focusing on is firstly competence in your field, in your area of interest. They got to know the subject. They don't necessarily need to be world-renowned experts on precisely your topic, but they do need to know enough about that area to oversee your work content-wise competently. The second thing, they must be methodologically competent and comfortable in the methods that you use. There are too many methods out there for somebody to master all of them to an equal degree, okay? But you need somebody who can oversee your work. Thirdly, get along. They don't have to be your best buddies. It's a working relationship. It's a professional relationship. But at the core of it, you've got to like each other. You've got to respect each other, okay? Remember, you're going to see their vulnerabilities, and they're going to see yours. And they're going to critique you where it hurts most, where you've put all your ideas, your hopes, your creativity, they're going to come shoot it down. You got to feel comfortable within that they're doing it for your benefit. Similarly, the supervisor must feel that the student is willing to work, willing to learn, willing to adapt. And my last one, I think, this is a very general category, but I think a good supervisor is on your side. Your interests are their interests. And that goes beyond the normal things that you'd expect, as in, get my drafts back in a reasonable amount of time, get a meeting without having to wait too long, etc. It goes to things like, if there's a funding opportunity, they'll let you know. If they're in the library and they stumble across something that they think might interest you, they'll quickly make a copy. If somebody's gossiping in the corridors about you, they go, hey, that's my student, come here. They're on your side. Okay. To my mind, who your supervisor is more important than what your topic is or which university you do your degree at. So that's the next of the basics. The next one, structure your work. Okay. Make a structure before you write. It is very easy to write yourself into a corner, to write and to write and to write, and eventually things don't fit. 1 second, I'm just going to get some water. That is an unpleasant place to be when things don't fit. If you are like most people, and in this one I'm betting you are like most people, you don't like the idea of throwing away 30, 40, 50 pages of written material. And so what you end up doing is doing what most people do, which is dragging out a big sledgehammer and hammering it into shape. You will make it fit. And that, of course, leads to dissertations that look like they've been hammered into shape. Okay, you don't want to go there. Structuring is what allows you not to go there. Make a dynamic table of contents. You heard me right. Write the table of contents before you write the work. But it's dynamic. Things will change. Okay, that's fine. But if they do change it first in the dynamic table of contents, and then start writing. That way you've always got that helicopter view, and you stay in control. On the subject of a dynamic table of contents, also, when you do that dynamic table of contents, put in anticipated page numbers. Okay? Because there's a general rule in all writing, and it counts for academic writing as well. Length equals importance. The more space you devote to anything, the more important your reader is going to think it is to you. Okay? Most people, when they write, they have something to write about, and they write and they write and they write until they're empty, until they have nothing more to say. And then they move to the next thing. But not everything is worth the space to take everything that you could possibly say about it. And some other things may require more than you're currently capable of saying. So if you put in the page numbers, it keeps the whole work in balance. The next of the basics, edit your work. Now, I'm not talking here about an external academic editor. Okay? If you're interested, I'll say a word about that later. But I'm talking about you editing your work. With all due respect, what you write the first time round is rubbish. Anything anybody writes the first time round is rubbish. The point of writing a first draft is to have something to edit. Okay? You want to get the points down, and then you edit it to make it right. Obviously, you'll be editing your work a couple of times before you hand in your chapter drafts. You'll edit it based on your supervisor's comments. But even when your dissertation is done, in my opinion, you should be editing it 6 to 8 times, cover to cover, minimum. And when you do, it will be transformed. If you then leave it alone for 6 months and you come back later and you read it, you're going to go, I wrote that? That is not half bad. You can surprise yourself with what you can come up with. It's editing that does that. If the return on investment is the quality of your work, and the investment is time, you cannot get a higher return on investment than to edit your own work. Now, do it differently. I said 6 to 8 times minimum, and I meant it. But I don't mean go through it page one, page last, page one, page. You're going to fall into a routine. Okay, that doesn't work. The first time, yeah, start on the first page, go to the last page. Work through every little bit. The second time, start on the last page, go to the first page, one by one. Takes it out of context. You'll spot more errors. Time after that, take a helicopter view. Look at it element by element by element. Are they in the right place? Are they doing what they're supposed to do? Is this weak? Is there something more I could do? Time after that, get some of that text-to-speech software. You can download it free. Sit back, listen to the computer reading your dissertation to you. You will spot more errors. Take them out, fix them. Time after that, look for flow. Are things connecting nicely? Time after that, look for the technical issues. Things like cross-references, captions, references, bibliography, etc. Time after that, print it out on blue or yellow paper. I know it sounds strange, but when you read it, you'll see more errors. Fix them, and so on and so forth. Do we use marking sheets in this department? The answer is almost certain to be yes. Yes, we do. And then I suggest that your next question be, may I have a copy, please? Okay. Get a copy. Incidentally, on the unlikely event that the department doesn't share them with students, just get anyone from any department, any other university, because you can phrase them differently, you can set them up differently, but ultimately good research is good research, and they all look for the same thing. Get a marking sheet, mark your own dissertation. Don't be your own best friend, don't be your own fiercest critic. Keep it as objective as you can, and go through it, step by step by step. Give yourself marks. Then, write your own evaluative report form, just like your examiners will. Essentially, what an evaluative report form is a justification for what one says in the marking sheet. Now, as PhDs, you won't get actual marks. You'll get a pass or a fail, okay? But give yourself, in your marking, a mark. And then in the evaluative report form, justify it. Why did I give myself 3 out of 5 for this, 7 out of 10 for that, and so on? And then give suggestions, as your examiners will, for improvement. And then go to your supervisor and say, guess what? And they're going to say, what? And you're going to say, I marked my own dissertation. And they're going to say, really? And you're going to say, yes. And I wrote my own evaluative report form. And now what are we going to do about it? Because you want their feedback on your marking as well. Fix what you can. Okay? And then it'll be, again, in much better shape. But my point being, it's fun. Prepare, do the work, enjoy it, and I wish you much, much success in your journey.